Good morning, greetings, hail Eris, hail the light. I'm Grandmaster Williams, PhD, and I give a greetings to each and every last one of you. I also extend a humble greetings to Grandmaster Crowley, the foundation of this particular house, and all of the officers, managers, and every Episcopos here. This is the second lecture of the 8 lecture series on Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness. And this is not the biosurvival circuit, the first circuit, right? Circuit number 2 also has, like circuit 1 and the other 6 circuits, 3 stages that detail the developmental points of the circuit. We're not going to get into them, those 3 stages, but each circuit has 3. And of 8 circuits, each with 3, we've come to the absolute value 24, right? Internal 24. Let's resonate, because as enlightened Masons, we've learned in Freemasonry about the working tools of the Mason. And we know one of them very well in the symbolic meaning in speculative Masonry, which is the 24-inch gauge, and how we suffice a day of good deed done, a day we can rest at night with, when we are in the 3rd segment, if you will, of our 24-inch gauge duty, or the work with it, which is where we would be resting, right? The second circuit of consciousness is the emotional circuit. The first is the biosurvival circuit, and we learn about it and how it relates to us in this house. We're going to learn how this circuit as well relates to us in this house in the very same manner of philosophy. But it's not the same circuit. This is the emotional circuit. It's very deep down. Lots of us, we put it that way. We put it in as the word emotion, really deep down inside. But we're going to understand consciousness is even deeper, that emotions are sitting on top of it or upon our consciousness, right? So the emotional circuit concerns itself with raw emotion, right? And also this dominant separation of behavior, sort of what we talked about in the first circuit lecture, right? Where we are separating or splitting the ego, right, into good and bad of the same object, because it's irrelevant. It's almost obsolete. We find it in the middle of our path. It's not one of those structures that is a part of our path or our goal, right? It's unprecedented, unseen, right? And we just need to basically, for functioning, take in information about it, its color, its texture, its size, that type of thing, all in the stead of moving forward, right? And so in humans, the emotional circuit is activated first when the child learns to walk. Interesting. What is it about walking that turns on or activates this emotional circuit? Do we get more energy when we're walking instead of crawling? I got to an age, I'm gonna tell you this, brothers and sisters, I held a lot here. I got to an age where I started to think crawling was more hard or more difficult than walking, because there's the arms that don't just freely rest at the side of one's body. When one's crawling, you're using your arms and you're using your legs. You have to use them to walk anyway, right? Even when the arms are at rest. I got to an age when I thought, hey, crawling is really the thing you don't want to do. You have to do your best to learn to walk, right? But in humans, it is activated. It's the emotional circuit first. Not so. I would not assume that this is alluding or implying that it only happens once. Rather, it happens first when the child learns to walk. More emotions, right? The emotional circuit is activated first. So it kicks in what was already there once this child learns to walk and is walking. Now activated is the second circuit, right? The dimension, like the first circuit, of one-dimensional perception, right? Forward, backward. The emotional circuit is based on up and down. Up is the swelling one's body size to represent dominance. Right? Create a special effect to my personal image. I want to inhale and hold it and make my to represent dominance. Right? Because the straighter our posture is, the more we make ourselves without, the more our body tells us um, in its version of what we're experiencing, separate from the mind, but not disassociated at all. It compensates. The brain's function is safety, not accuracy. It's compensating. So the more we are putting ourselves without, the more we are starting to feel the importance of structuring ourselves so that we're not in that position, so that we are with, right? So we swell the body to represent dominance. And then we're straightening ourselves up. If only we didn't have to worry about presenting ourselves as if we are dominant, we'd be doing something like just straightening our posture and wanting to have that type of look, which also delivers that effect of dominance, or we would transpose it perhaps into high self-esteem or self-confidence, self-efficacy, those type of things. Self-efficacy, probably encompassing the high self-esteem or the self-confidence, right? Versus if we would like that, right? We were slouched over, right? Sitting on our abdomen, right? Instead of the waist, right? It wouldn't give off that same effect of self-confidence. If it was self-confidence within us, there'd be something inside of us others can't see, which isn't going to be very helpful or essential when we're trying to fare day to day through our natural lives. There's got to be that is agreeable, that is of ethical consideration, that includes some level or degree of spirituality, right? Some grip of spirituality in order to interpersonally connect with others. And so that's up, and down is the cowering, 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 almost like the word coward or cowering. It's the tail between the legs, submissive stance in a nutshell, right? Like a cowan, we learn in Freemasonry, is not serious about becoming a part of the fraternity or wants to learn as much as possible about us, or gentle craft rather. A cowan is what it's called, right? almost like a masquerader, right? But someone who's purposefully misleading about the position in a large house. Um, you know, goes hand in hand pretty much with an eavesdropper as well as a masquerader. So cowering is the tail between the legs, submissive stance, right? In other words, one who's not in that mood to dare to know anything, right? Not to dare to know it, as we'd say in superiority, with my fellow superiorians. Um, you know, superiority means to dare to know, and it's been adopted. And that that phrase has been used by entities, more than one, not just us in the virtual order of superiority. Um, so yes, um, that is the dimension of the second circuit of consciousness, up down, right? Up, swelling, the body size to represent or look dominant, right? To represent dominance, and that's up. And the other down is the tail between the legs, submissive stance or cowering, right? So now I want to talk to you a little bit if you're familiar with the MPS, the Masonic Philosophical Society, which I'm a member of. Um, and I also attend the Masonic Seminar Series as well. That's given through uh, the co-masonry, and also I'm enrolled in the Masonic Institute of Fine Arts as well. That is offered by the co-masonry. Um, the Masonic Philosophical Society has an emblem, and our emblem, since it's based on the society that is, it's it's based on education, right? Within the framework of Masonic principles, right? Um, and that emblem for the Masonic Philosophical Society is what's called an Enneagram, right? An Enneagram. The Enneagram is a 9-pointed object. It is used ultimately in the MPS or by the MPS as a tool, right? It's what the MPS curriculum uh, continues in forward momentum um, by or through, where the individual is concerned, in my opinion, right? This disclaimer I'm going to make: I'm not speaking as if I am representing Freemasonry or the stance of Freemasonry, the fraternity, nor any brother in this fraternity, nor sister in the chapters. Rather, my own opinion, right? Your question was accent. Well, I took British English as a foreign language in college, and I, speak it enjoyably as your, a Spanish foreign language student, who aced Spanish, speaks Spanish, right? Or Espanol, right? And the same with Italian, a B Italian student. But those are grade school days. And when I got to college, I took British English because by then, returning to college at 40, which was 4 years ago, I'm 44 now, um, and having been initiated into Freemasonry at the age of 18 as a Lewis in 1998, the 20th century. We're here in the 21st century. And I have a lot of brethren in Freemasonry whom are from the UK, where they speak English, Eastern English accent, not the Western English accent. So I thought, okay, it might help me out one day, 3, 4 decades away from now, to have learned the standard professional, if you will, way to speak um, British English, and that's what I did, and I like it. So that's the accent. If you notice it, if we're all linguistically aware of everything being in harmony as terms, just as important of a parts of reality as those common or more common or popular things are, then you might not even notice an accent. Who's to say? I already assume that you're an audience that's not British English. Therefore, I'm speaking British English, and you can notice that versus not notice because all speak and sound the same, right? And vice versa. So, um, the Masonic Philosophical Society has an emblem, though, therefore, that's called the Enneagram, and it's a 9-pointed object that is composed of 3 individual triangles, right? And when we uh, perform the 3 general evaluations of knowledge independently, mind you, we then simultaneously, philosophically, are putting together or allowing or enabling the Enneagram to form from the 3 triangles, right? That each break down into subcategories for the 3 sides as well. When we break down the Enneagram in such a way that we're performing the 3 general evaluations of knowledge, we then are putting it together, right? It's forming. So essentially, if we don't perform these 3 general evaluations of knowledge, we don't ever have an Enneagram. We've got those 3 triangle knowledges or knowledges, 3 knowledge triangles. They are each going to sit and wait and just as content as they can each be, right? Until we've a need for them to form the Enneagram, which then, as the Enneagram, is the emblem for the Masonic Philosophical Society. And for the members of the MPS, it's a tool. So essentially, we can't get work done as Masonic philosophy students if we don't have an Enneagram. And we don't have an Enneagram unless we perform the 3 general evaluations of knowledge, right? It's formed by 3 general evaluations of knowledge. 1, physical; 2, metaphysical; 3, cultural. Each one has 3 subcategories, right? But the physical one, let's talk about it first. The physical triangle embodies all objective points of the universe. Imagine we're talking about making all of this relevant to us in this house. Let's think about how we are going to study or ponder much upon the universe in this fraternity, right? When we learn enough about discordianism, right, and concordianism, and Eris, the goddess of discord in Greek mythology, and Aries, the sign under which Eris is, along with countless other human beings, mortals, right, whom were born under the sign of Aries. I was born in the sign of Aquarius. Nonetheless, the physical triangle embodies all objective points of the universe. We're going to want to evaluate these knowledges in this physical triangle because it embodies all objective points. of the universe. It's going to help us understand the barriers as things that we have visited in the first circuit lecture, as things that are not a part of our journey. They are unprecedented. They are barriers. They are boulders in the pathway. And we only need to process them as much as it takes for us to get around and bypass them, right? To take mental note of, right, the color, the size, the shape, maybe take a picture for a souvenir, a memory. But beyond that, they have no use for us or to us in this stead of, our search for knowledge, right? Um, the objective points of the universe are embodied in the physical triangle, right? And when we talk about the three subcategories to this triangle, we talk about natural sciences, behavioral sciences, and formal sciences. They are all in the physical knowledge triangle, right? Breaking it down, forming is the Enneagram, when we as well are into the second knowledge, which is metaphysical. The metaphysical triangle doesn't embody all of the objective points of the universe. It symbolizes the subjective nature of the universe, right? And so the three subcategories to it are philosophy, esotericism, and theology. And the final one is the cultural knowledge. The cultural triangle captures its expressive form. It being the universe, it captures its expressive form. And three subcategories belong to it. Perhaps you might want to envision or imagine this as being each point of a triangle. Um, Literature, art, and history. So when we perform the three general evaluations of knowledge in Masonic context, through the framework of Masonic principles, we are explaining to ourselves some things. We are journeying and going beyond traditional education to delve deeper into the mysteries of his or her universe, or our own universe. And this, in our consciousness, is circulating around our body, and we are structuring ourselves and composing ourselves. We are forming a posture that says something that is effective in the world or our environment around us, right? That conditions our awareness, which influences our consciousness, and we can continue to practice things that are going to better us, right? A little reward for that, if you will, or an award, excuse me, for that is, as is told in the literature in the MPS, the Enneagram is formed. In other words, each of those triangles form together and make a nine-pointed object. That is the Enneagram, the nine-pointed Enneagram, right? So that I mentioned about the emotional circuit, because we get very into our emotions and we don't have to be sublime to do it. We can be very philosophical and get into our emotions, very psychological, right? Very, actual and practical. Um, so the emotional circuit is not the emotion circuit, right? We've got emotion, but emotional goes through emotion, right? And we've got raw emotion. Emotions are natural, instinctive state of mind, deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. Moreover, emotional is relating to a person's emotions, right? These things are deriving from our mood, circumstances, or relationships. And depending on what those specifically happen to be, it's our emotional circuit that we are in or engaging, right? So, from what our emotion comes from, we get emotional. And we can't foresee what that is because it involves others. Relationships with others involves others. Some of our emotions are on hold in terms of the emotional circuit because we've not encountered what is going to engage or activate the circuit in the mind as of yet, right? So we have the emotion already. And as it takes its course, then we are emotional, right? So we have to understand an emotional stance of Aries, okay? Hey, as it is said about the fifth degree in the POEE, we don't know anything about the popes. So my guess or suggestion, my idea here is that at least the Holy Discordian popes in the house, have a need to bear the seal of authenticity of a master mason of the third degree, which is included in the third degree. It's a description of the third degree, which is a seal of authenticity. Um, for a personal reason, because we are those who have aspired to go to that level. We think it's something in it for us. We connect with it, right? And it's the same respect for each degree, right? We're all in mind of what we can handle and what we can't, right? And so we have to understand an emotional stance of Aries from what we learned in the first lecture in about the wedding ceremony that she was informally at. And other stuff that we've learned about Eris as a Greek goddess, the Greek goddess of discord, chaos, and strife. Well, let's understand an emotional stance of Eris, though. For us mortals who aren't Greek gods, but we love Eris, we hail Eris. We want to understand, ideally, an emotional stance of Eris. How do we do that? How are we going to do it? Grandmaster Williams, we're going to do something similar to what is suggested and recommended of members in the Masonic Philosophical Society, for example. But anywhere where personal development is at the core of interests of all the curriculum, that is most important, it is most priority. Such as Freemasonry, to make good men better, right? So that you don't go into any place and leave that place in the same or worse condition than you were when you enter it. That could be the grocery store, a convenience store, um, you know, a schoolhouse, right? But the idea is when you go into a place on your own free will, such as joining this fraternity is, when you go into a place on your own free will, that when you leave it or exit it, to go in your own respective way until we meet again in the house, right? You leave better, all hands down, than you did or than you were when you entered, right? We know Freemasonry, the initiate becomes the perfect ashlar, right? And it's not possible if there are no vices in the life, superfluities to clean up, to have a reason to carve out of the first degree, if you will, a perfect ashlar with the use of the working tools of the fellow craft degree. right? So according Aries to this, hooking Aries to it, we talked a little on Aries, the zodiac sign. Emotions can be held deeply. Hear me go on this part. This is the predicate to the subject. So emotions are also traveled through quickly, right? So we're talking about the surface. We're not getting down there where the conscious is, right? We're not getting uh, down there where awareness is, right? We need to be where environment is, right? Because we need to get there in order to get further. If we don't have logic, metaphysics is not going to help us, right? Metaphysics involves possibility and change, right? If we have no connection in our environment, we are not going to be able to identify the factors of change, economic or whatever, right? Nor those social movements that bring about social change that are so to speak, adjacent, metaphorically, to things that arouse our awareness, right? Into our consciousness and our emotions. We just don't get emotional just because we've emotions. We don't get emotional, right? Because we talked about that. There's a little difference in them. That there are circumstances that take place, and that this is involving other people, which we can't, control. Okay. So as sure as we've learned from the first lecture that Aries is Eris, excuse me, that Eris is insatiable in her desire for bloodshed. And after all the other gods have withdrawn from the battlefield, she still remains rejoicing over the havoc that's been made, that she's obviously got an emotional stance somehow. She's emotional when she's at this battlefield dancing. After all the other gods have withdrawn from the battlefield, there is no battle left to fight. Right? So she's in a mood to rejoice. She's got to have an emotional stance, doesn't she? I surely think so. Um, but Aries has emotions that we cannot own as Discordians. We're not Aries again, right? Our emotions aren't the same as Aries' emotions, all in circumstances and our relationships with other people. And so Aries has to be understood from an emotional circuit. An emotional circuit, right? We should be mindful while we move along, though, about the 8 circuits of consciousness, at least pertaining to the first 4, which we are within, um, being that the first 4 circuits of 8 are all dealing with Earth, right? And then the latter 4 get into the terrestrial, but we'll get um, to that attribute once we enter the latter 4. When we get to lecture 5, 6, or 7 to 8, we'll talk about that um, segment of the 8 circuits of consciousness, because they are not as a group of circuits like this group of circuits that we're in right now. Um, and this is just for the purpose just to disclose that for purposes of academic investigation for those who want to get into it or take notes and etc. This lecture series here, to make that note. It also in the Leary's model of the 8 circuits of consciousness, is broken down into two components. And there's the first 1 through 4, and there's the 5 through 8, the other four. And one's related to earth and one isn't, right? In philosophy. So let's look at it philosophically, Discordians, and let's see what submissive nature, and remember what we talked about in the three general evaluations of knowledge. One of them is the metaphysical triangle, right? Which represents the submissive nature of the universe, or symbolizes it. Let's remember that when we talk about submissive nature, because that's exactly what we just got into, right? The metaphysical triangle symbolizes the subjective nature of the universe, right? And that's not too far out of the ballpark from looking at this to see, in that same respect, with, what regard to his or her man, woman universe, this uh, this mystery about discordianism is coming from, what it's coming from, right? In all consciousness, what it's coming from. In all temperance, what it's coming from. In all fortitude, what it is coming from. In all prudence, what it is coming from. And in all justice, what it is coming from. Those are the four cardinal virtues of Freemasonry, right? Temperance, fortitude, prudence, justice, right? I like to go temperance, prudence, fortitude, justice, but sometimes I just put them in any order to practice, to be more proficient at actually letting it soak in, not just remember in such as a list form or something to recite. But the words I've been familiar with before I learned that they are the four cardinal virtues of Freemasonry. But to get into these mysteries, right? Because Eris does not just she doesn't dissolve and go away, and just leave us with a trail to go to discordianism. She's the goddess of discord, right? And so discordianism has become more popular since the 1970s. Saw the Illuminatus trilogy, right? And so, we can climb her emotional intelligence interpersonally as we're others, and we're not her, vice versa. I think more effectively than if we tried to climb her lifestyle behavior, because we have no access to her emotions. We are able to connect her emotional circuit, but we could create discord in this, right? We could, right? So, we've got what's submissive, and then we can get to what is subjective. And what's happening in there, what has happened is exposure. And this is a religion that's very modern. It's not got as much exposure as older religions, right? It's not very widespread as of yet, right? So let's attribute emotion, not in the emotional circuit, but emotion in terms of consciousness to the left lobe of Eris, because this circuit, it takes place in the left lobe, and suffice this circuit chronologically makes sense as a premise in the second circuit, so we can build right on this circuit what it is that we want to talk about in terms of our fraternity and how this Eight Circuits of Consciousness model by Leary is relevant to us, so that we are going beyond traditional education. We are still learning on a platform that is built or based, or that is the framework of Masonic principles. And this is not, as you would take this Eight Circuits of Consciousness model and deliver it to your common education environment or setting at all. It's not going to be the same explanation. We are esoteric at times, aren't we? And definitely in this house, obviously, in the polytheo meta-animistic code of Eris esoteric, obviously the word esoteric is in it. We're esoteric. So we can look at this circuit while we are in it, and we're kind of expanding the perspective into a Masonic context, if you will. And we can, suffice that it is a good premise upon which we can do that. It will hold, in other words, while we sort of venture around with it, if you will, among the general knowledges, around the knowledges, right? Esotericism is one of the subcategories of the metaphysical knowledge and the knowledge triangle. It is one of the points. Metaphysical, because Eris is branded by the universe. She's branded by the universe. And, she can pick and choose what she feels like in light of it. She doesn't, again, have to let it define her, rather refine her, or instead of refine her. And the same liberty is ours as Discordians, right? So she can also choose how to feel, as well as what she feels, how to, and it's due to knowledge of when her emotional circuit is activated. That is happening periodically. So she's not stuck to the labels. As a goddess, she's a goddess. Goddess of discord, sure, but she has the ability to transpose it, to change it, to, modify it. It's her thing. Since she's at the service, or at service, to the point of dedication as a Greek goddess, we might have to theologicalize and philosophicalize her esotericism, right? To where she's in mystery. So then we've something more to look forward to, right? We can just be very moderate in some areas like emotions. We don't want to, plunge to the bottom of the sea of somebody else's emotional intelligence, right? Because then we're not being very considerate of that person's structure, their psychological structure, when we do that. Since she is, I'm going to say, whether it's arguable or not, the goddess of order or harmony or not, or concordianism or not, she still has her own free choice. She is a bearer of undesired things of others. The things they get rid of, they turn around, since they really don't get rid of them, they just discard them, is what we turn around and look at as chaos or not organized. And we go further and further away from them until we create a landfill or a wasteland, until we've got what I've heard about in orbit, which is a planet that's larger than the planet Jupiter. Literally, folks, here we go from this. Larger than the planets of Jupiter, and it is all made of human waste over time in space travel or from space travel. Bit by bit, fragment by fragment, debris by debris, there is now a planet that is larger than the size of Jupiter, the planet Jupiter. And it is in orbit, and it is all constructively waste from space travel through time, over a period of time. We could do that and end up with one of those, right? But she's a bearer of undesired things, and so we don't ever have to worry about coming upon one of those kinds of ordeals, do we? Because Eris is the goddess of discord. She takes care of it. When the other gods have withdrawn from the battlefield, she remains there. She's sort of a catalyst to say it's not chaos. You've got to understand it for what it truly is. Maybe use your descriptive words in a different way at a different time for a different situation. But when you're using your own logic and your own senses have to come to play, you've got to accept things the way they really are. Or you can have discord within. You can be at disharmony on the inside, right? If your challenge is with external locus of control, you could have discord within, and then you not be very happy with your level of consciousness more than you imagine. So she's a bearer of undesired things, and when the universe cannot come to recognize her, in my opinion, then otherwise is being connected, right? And these things that are important, she knows and we know and believe, are being unconnected in the left lobe. And then we're not able to correspond at all any of the first four circuits because they are dealing with the earth. And that is where humans come from. And the physical aspect is where we come from, right? So the emotional circuit, it as well has the three stages that detail the developmental points, like each circuit does have. And we can understand her emotions, raw emotions, that is, in a conscious way, by getting into those developmental points, and then understanding why in the stages those points are named what they are. The names of those three stages are to each circuit that detail the developmental points of the circuit. We get into what the developmental points of the circuit are, then we can identify each of the three stages to the circuit and understand how that circuit in our personal life is relevant and based on how we apply it, whether we are applying it accurately or correctly by the time we come upon the information, or if it has been inaccurate or improperly by the time we get to this information. We get to the information, and then we have the opportunity to change where necessary, right? That is being conscious. It's not being embarrassed about what we created. It's not being embarrassed about the first or the original, right? The original product, right? Some will have theirs totally a disarray and leave it that way because they don't want to be embarrassed, but feeling that if they change it, it admits that they didn't do it right in the first place, right? It proves that you're conscious, and you've got to be self-conscious. You need your need for your own consciousness. These things, these circuits are activated when we are little kids. So in adulthood, we need them. You've got to twerk or tweak or tune yours up when necessary, no matter what it makes your prior look like, what you've done before that, days, months, moments, seconds. It's how you are conscious. It's what makes you look confident. And that's more important than whether you're impressive or not, right? And this is what we need to learn and to understand and to relate when we're talking about um, uh, discord, right? It's a different word in philosophy from discordian, which is also different in its own respect from discordianism, right? The prefixes and the suffixes on words change the parameter of them or the gauge of them totally. An inch, a mile, it's the same, right? So we need to learn that about the emotional circuit. This lecture is not as long as the first one, because there's more, in my opinion, to talk about, to think about when it comes to survival than emotions. And because there's a lot more of a connection with our environment when we're in the survival mode or the horde mode than when we are in the emotional circuit. When we're in the biosurvival mode, there's more factorially that plays a part along those levels where we are in our worst day than the emotional circuit, which we want to be at our best whenever we are aware that we are activated, the emotional circuit is activated. We're not going to want to ever deal then on a worst day at all, no matter what it's about, right? Because that's totally untangible. And survival is going to place us more intensely. Just as it is chronologically, it's the first circuit, it's the intense thing. It's when we first come into reality of something or the actualization of something. And then the emotional circuit we've visited today, right, in the lecture number 2. And this is exactly what we're going to learn as we go chronologically from 1 to 8 over this 8 lecture series. Is why exactly, as though we aren't really understanding or learning in each lecture how this relates to discordians, how this relates to us in the House of Eris, the Discordian Illuminati Masonic Lodge jurisdictions, right? And so that is the emotional circuit lecture. And again, I commend you for attending, for being able to fit this into your schedules, for being as honorable and prestigious to appear um, and fellowship and encourage other brethren and sisters to remain steadfast in their personal lives and what it is that they think this brotherhood offers that will allow them to build stronger in their own walk in life. And I sincerely invite you back to lecture 3, which is not going to be the emotional circuit nor the biosurvival circuit, um, but is going to be looked at as it has relevancy to us in the House of Eris, and not just in, or as if we were in a public school setting, and of course wanting to do the very same quality of a job, um, you know, looking into it, discussing it, taking it to thought and to consideration, right? We want to remember that stamp of ours we've earned, that we go beyond traditional education. We go beyond it. Freemasonry is post-college level education, as college is post-secondary education. Yeah, I didn't go to college first before I became a Freemason, but I'm not the only one. Um, but because I enjoy it, I've been able to catch myself up to the correct pace, as if, everything has been as seamless as it has, and I don't make a big deal out of it, rather than focus on becoming the one who's aware of the change and the possibility that exists. And so my consciousness is more important to me. And I hope that you found or find this helpful. We meet upon the level of equality, we act by the plumb of uprightness, and we part upon the square of virtues. Hail the light.